everyone has their first moment when they realize, "Ooh, I really like aviation and space and I want to be a part of that in my life." What was that moment for you?
Yeah, I think it was probably not until my college years. I didn't, when I was younger. Well, of course, astronauts didn't exist. When I was a kid, they were a product of well, I was 11 years old, I guess, as Sputnik went up, and then people started talking about astronauts about the time I was in high school, maybe or whatever. They hired their original astronauts, so it wasn't the kind of thing I was thinking about as a career. Yeah, but I was always fascinated by flying, but I was first and foremost I wanted engineering training. So I was focused on getting through college, and I chose Lehigh, as you know, um,
What made
and
you choose
yeah,
Lehigh? Like,
I had a couple of friends that were a year or two older than me. I grew up in Pittsburgh in the South Hills, and a couple of friends a year or two older than me, and Lehigh just had a really great reputation for engineering, particularly. Although the
interesting.
school was always good in the other two colleges as well, but Lehigh was the dominant uh, discipline, back in that in the '60s and all. So I think it was for the reputation of the school, and it wasn't, it was across the state. It was 6 hours away, but
Yeah.
it wasn't too far.
You became an Air Force engineer, I believe, from what I read. Was that like the path you chose was, okay, I'm going to be an Air Force engineer. My college degree is in engineering. Did Lehigh prepare you for NASA in
Mhm.
some way? Was that kind of like the path?
Yeah, but that was still beyond my horizon.
Right, right.
Yeah, I actually went to work for Bell Telephone Laboratories when I graduated, and they were working at that in New Jersey. They were working on the Nike X system, the what became Safeguard, the anti-ballistic missile system. Yeah, so my first job
Wait,
with
did you
them.
say Nike ballistic? Did you say Nike
Yeah,
ballistic? So that's
yeah.
actually that's in my outline. I didn't realize that you worked on that.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, not for very long, but it was my first job out of college, and that was a great group to be with. I mean, they were
Wow.
the Bell Labs was the general system contractor for the phaser array radars, the PAVE-PAW that's still out there. The big radar facilities in North Dakota and out in Alaska and other places. And then the two missiles were the Sprint missile and the Spartan that were going to intercept warheads coming in.
Was
So
that
it,
the importance? I like to know the background of things because this is what the film is going to focus on is the background of things, not so much. Yeah, you
yeah.
were in space, space shuttle, the moon landing, and all that stuff is great, but this is before the moon, so
Yeah,
that's the name of the film. So this is all the behind the scenes. So what was the importance of the missiles you worked on?
it was ballistic missile defense. Was and the technology was not like today where you could do a direct impact. Like the Patriot system.
Yeah,
You're hitting a bullet with a bullet. Back then we didn't have the technology for that kind of guidance. So the two missiles had nuclear weapons on them actually. So
wow.
they exploded either on space or on the edge of space to knock
Okay.
out the incoming missile. And they were testing them out of Kwajalein in the Western Pacific. They launched the target from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, and then
Right.
they'd intercept it. Not with a nuke, but
Right.
going off.
When you worked at Bell Labs, was that when you got your patents?
Yeah, that was a few years later when I was not doing military work. I was in power systems
Oh,
when I came back from the Air Force. The Nike X system was gone. They did SALT II, the strategic arms limitation talks. President Reagan negotiated that with the Russians, and we both stood down from doing any more defensive
I see.
systems like that. So the radars are still there, but we never deployed those missiles.
At that point, it's got to be time frame for when you were involved with the selection process for NASA, like around
Mhm.
there somewhere. How did that even happen?
Yeah, well, first, from there, I went into the Air Force. So I only spent well, Bell Labs sent me off to MIT for my master's, and then
Oh,
that
no
was
big
right.
deal. No big deal there.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that was part of the hiring
By
program.
the
You
way, I got my
yeah.
master's at MIT also.
Yeah, well, yeah, in 9 months actually. But
Wow,
yeah,
you're a
do that.
smart cookie.
Yeah, I don't think you could. Well, that wasn't be as smart. It was just that everything was in a hurry back then because I was
Oh,
on
okay, okay.
the firm. I mean, the Army would have drafted me, and I wanted to fly, so I kind of had an accelerated schedule there. And then as soon as I finished my master's, I took a leave of absence from Bell Labs and went into the Air Force.
And how
So
long
then
were
I
you there?
was 4 years on active duty. I flew fighters, mostly
Ooh.
F-106. Yeah. So
Did you ever
yeah,
get
it
a
was.
chance to do the X? F-15, or is that what the
No, no, I
X-15?
wasn't a well. That was kind of in my thought plan because I was right toward the end of the 4 years. I was assigned to an F4 to Thailand. It was right at the end of the Vietnam War, and
Okay,
they canceled that because the war was almost over at
it
that
was
point,
over.
and then they had too many pilots. So they said, "Well,
Oh,
what do you want to do? Do you want to stay on that?" I still had 2 years left of my commitment. They said, "Do you want to stay and finish your 2 years?" And I said, "I'll do that if you send me to test pilot training in
gotcha.
space." And they said, "Well, we got too many pilots there too."
Oh, okay.
That wasn't open. They said, "But if you want to go with the National Guard unit, you can trade your remaining commitment 3 for 1." So I
Oh,
got, and the same planes I was flying up in Maine, the same F-106s were going to Atlantic City.
oh, wow.
So it was a little serendipity because my job was still waiting for me in New Jersey with Bell Labs. So
That's cool.
I said, yeah, I called the Guardian and they said, we'd love to have you, So I got off active duty. And then instead of doing 6 years, I ended up doing 17 years, with the National Guard,
Whoa.
flying on the weekends. Yeah. Even when I was at NASA, I flew with a Texas Air Guard on the weekends, so I
So
had a,
you're really an aviator, it sounds like. Wow, I didn't realize that.
well, again, I think of myself as an engineer, but I've had all these nice opportunities to fly,
You've flown a lot. It sounds like
yeah,
you
yeah,
flew. You have a
yeah.
lot of hours logged. It sounds like.
About
What?
3,200 and 5,000 total, but 3,200 in fighters.
That's amazing.
Mm.
That's yeah, that's a lot. And
Yeah.
that's tough. I mean, I've watched enough, film and read a lot about
Mm.
that and the training and
Hmm.
the blacking out,
Yeah.
the, so there's a lot. That's kind of what my film is really going to focus on is the training that was
Mhm.
required to help fighter pilots like yourself not black
Um,
out using the
yeah.
centrifuge. Did you do any of that stuff?
I didn't do the centrifuge, but we had training in the sense that we wore G suits and you had to learn how to do what they call the M1 maneuver, which is kind of grunting to keep the blood pressure up in your head. And
Yeah.
the F-106 was a very capable airplane, but still, it kind of, that third generation fighters, if you maneuvered real hard, you'd lose airspeed. They just didn't have enough thrust.
Oh,
So you could pull a lot of G's, but not for very long. Where
okay.
they got into trouble was when when they rolled the F-16 out. Now they had an airplane that could sustain 6 Gs.
Oh, wow.
And the human body can't do that. So
No.
they tilted the seat back 30 degrees, like you're in an F-16 cockpit. You're like sitting in a rocking chair,
Right.
and they did that to lower the heart. I'm sorry, lower your head closer to your heart,
Got it.
so that you could tolerate the G's.
The
And,
the,
and
bl-
then
the
what they
blood, yeah.
found, yeah, so they were doing better, but then they were still getting G lock, a G loss of consciousness. And I think one or two F-16 pilots were killed actually. But the
Ooh.
other problem they got into was that they were tearing their heart sacs.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Yeah,
right.
they
Yeah.
were coming back in their early training missions. They come back, and they get an irritation around their heart. I mean, it wasn't like life threatening, but it was like, whoa,
We're
we're
tearing our
pulling
hearts.
too hard on the internal organs.
Jeez. I mean, I
Yeah.
mean, and all of this really sets up the scene for the rocket launches into space.
The shuttle was a pussycat in that we throttled the engines back to maintain 3 Gs. We never exceeded
Right.
three. Um, but if you want the other rockets, the Titan, the earlier ones, and I think the Saturn too, they got up to about 4 Gs. And on a reentry, they'd pull 4 or 5 Gs because they came in real steep. But again, the shuttle, because it had wings, it came in real shallow, and we only had 1.5 Gs on reentry.
Right, right. And I spoke to Stokes McMillan. He's a shuttle simulation
Mm.
specialist. He was in charge of like training all the astronauts
Oh,
for the shuttle missions at Johnson Space Center.
yeah.
And he knows who you are, but he started there in '78, so he must have trained you
Oh,
guys.
yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I don't recognize the name, but I bet we came across him. Yeah, we had
yeah, he
hundreds
said
and hundreds of trainers.
he would throw every malfunction at you guys
Yeah.
on a regular basis, thousands of. So I want to hear from your words. What was the training experience like to not only learn the new technology as an engineer? You have that kind of mechanical technological brain that says, well,
Mm.
I have to learn this software. The simulator, there's a lot of switches and lights and things that can go wrong. And how did you adapt to this new environment? Because it was very new. I mean, video games were just invented really at that time.
Yeah, well, I think all of us, it was like a fish to water. I mean, it's just the people. I don't think people realize that that's probably like one of NASA's number one competencies is training the astronauts. I mean, they spend a lot of money, of course, and the simulators are always state of the art, but they really know how to do that, and they walk it. It takes a whole year, basically, back in our day, anyways, to learn the shuttle systems. But it's so much fun, particularly if you're an engineer or a pilot, which most people were, but even the astronomers and medical doctors, they all were soaking it up, and
That's cool.
it was a it was an amazing machine. The shuttle was very complicated, and for the
Like
most part, it did
millions of moving
pretty
parts that
well.
could go
Yeah,
wrong. I mean,
yeah,
it's and what I found fascinating was the external orange tank that had the liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, and how they had to
yeah,
get mixed into the shuttle, and
right,
the three engines then use that fuel, and it gets mixed with ball bearings and all this other stuff. But
yeah.
the fact that there is no fuel on the shuttle, it's in the tank, and then once it's depleted, then there's no fuel, just the orbiter,
Yeah,
reaction,
well, what we call the hypergolic engines,
the
the
thrusters that
hypergolic
can get you,
engines.
yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was very interesting that the fuel's actually not on, but which is, also less dangerous too.
No,
Okay.
all of our training was more, mental, learning how to operate things,
Interesting.
and underwater. We did weightless training, the spacewalks, and all we did in a big swimming pool down there.
All right.
So
So the
that's
debate,
kind of physical when you're doing spacewalks. That can be demanding.
everyone always asks that. So what's the difference between the water tank and actual space? Is it a huge difference?
Uh, yeah, if you can do it in the tank, you could do it in space. It's harder in the tank actually,
Oh,
but it's similar because you're neutrally buoyant. But
right.
if you turn upside down in the tank, I mean all the blood rushes to your head. You know you're
Right.
upside down. Whereas in space it's always the same.
How did you adapt to that? Because like from what I've read, it's like congestion in your head, and like your nose
Mhm.
gets congested. You almost feel sick for a while. Like,
Yeah, yeah, most people do. I was pretty sick the first day. The congestion in your head, everybody gets, and this because without gravity, the fluids come up in your head, and that actually sends a signal to your body that you're overhydrated. So the
mm,
first day or two, you start peeing a lot. You end up actually dehydrated a little bit if you're not careful.
oh wow,
Your body feels that pressure, it thinks you're overhydrated. But
got to
like
use that.
if you lay down for a long period of time, like take a day nap. Usually, when you
Okay,
get up, you have to go to the bathroom because your kidneys start working harder when they feel that pressure in your neck. There, the way our bodies work. But the sickness, I don't think they really ever really have quite figured out why that is. Because I think it's a brainstem kind of thing. Because I was pretty sick the first day, and then when I went to sleep that first night. About 20 minutes after I finally fell asleep, I had a nightmare that I was falling,
oh my
and
God,
are falling, right? And I remember reaching,
you
trying
were in
to,
space falling.
yeah, exactly. I remember reaching, trying to grab something, So, consciously, I was fine when we hit zero G. I was all excited, to get on with it. And I started moving around real quick. And then I realized I was in trouble. About a third of the people that go up, feel something the first day. And then a third, maybe a third gets sick. I mean, a third don't maybe feel so good. And it's maybe only one third that actually have no symptoms at all the first day. And it's not
Interesting.
correlated. It's not correlated to anything on the Earth, like
Right.
motion sickness in a car or a boat or an
It's not the
airplane. Man,
same.
I thought everything you can do in an airplane. It never made me sick. And
It's just
then Bill
totally
Bill
different.
Poe Bill Poe was on Skylab, and he was a Thunderbird, and he got sick. So they
Okay.
don't understand it. But my theory, I told the doctors when I got back, my theory is it's a brainstem fear of falling, that
Interesting.
your
And
brainstem
then
starts emitting endorphins or whatever it does.
and then it adapts to that, right? After a couple days, I was
Oh
like,
yeah.
how long did it take you to feel like
Uh,
you were normal
I was still a little funny the second day, but everyone's fine by the third
the
day.
third
So
day?
yeah, we don't schedule spacewalks until the third day, because of that.
Yeah, and I do have the STS 41C,
Oh, cool.
the envelopes. I've always had these for a while too.
Yeah.
STS 41C was interesting because you were operating the arm, which apparently you did so easily. You were just so naturally adept at using the Canadarm to retrieve the solar max.
Mhm.
Um, what was that like? I mean, it's like I can't even imagine.
It's pretty intuitive. I mean, there weren't video games back in that era, but you could kind of compare it to a video game because you have a camera there, and on the end of the arm there's a camera, and there's a monitor in the cockpit, and you fly it around just like an airplane, you know. So you find a satellite and you fly into it and dock to it. So it's very intuitive the way it's designed. You know, the Canadians did a really good job, and I
Was
did
it
a lot of training up in Toronto for that.
okay? Was it really
But
slow? Like, did you have to move very slowly to like not
yeah.
damage the satellite? And
Yeah, you want to do that. Everything in space, you know, there's a saying among the astronauts, if you can tell you're moving too fast.
okay, so it's like super
It should
super
be
slow.
like docking and anything you do, you want to do real slow. And you know, because there's not a whole lot of muscle, you know, when you get things moving too fast, it's hard to stop, you know. So yeah, so we train to do everything real smooth and real slow.
So part of the film, as you know, we're trying to do like a call to action, right? I mean, NASA's getting gutted with the funding these days,
Yeah.
and I know Lehigh's doing an aerospace master's program, which is
Hmm.
huge. We're doing a lot of STEM stuff down here with like the new generation. So like I'm trying to really include the next generation. What are
Hmm.
your thoughts on the aspect of mentorship, influencing the next generation of engineers out there? What would you say to them in terms of like how to approach it, like what they should potentially do if they want to be involved with space in some way?
That's my job, Jason.
Well, this is exactly well, that is a perfect question.
Yeah, I love teaching. I teach a lot of different things, you know, control systems, some kind of formal technology courses, but I also teach spacecraft design and astrodynamics and aircraft design. You know, and
Oh, that's cool.
so yeah, it's fun because once the students get to me, they're usually seniors and some grad students. You know, they're really excited to finally be doing design kind of courses. You know, as opposed to thermodynamics and fluid dynamics and so forth. You know, so.
Right,
Yeah, so it's easy to get them excited, you know, especially the ones that are already thinking, you know, about,
right.
and you know, there's so much going on now, particularly in space, as you know, so better than I do. There's just a whole lot. I mean, the aviation side, that's doing wonderful things too, but space for the last decade here has really been taken off, and I think it's because
Yeah.
now launching, you know, with SpaceX and all these constellations of satellites, there's just
Yep.
a whole lot, you know,
The,
going on.
the privately funded companies really took things to a new
Yeah.
level. I mean, once the shuttle program was decommissioned and now we're going to the moon with the Artemis missions,
Yeah.
uh, to establish an actual base there, it's going to be a totally
Yeah,
different, and it's going to be different, right? So,
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, really, one of the things that never gets mentioned in documentaries or movies about space, which is pretty obvious, is the people behind the missions, right? The
Hmm.
people behind the scenes. You must have interacted with so many
Oh yeah,
people.
yeah,
Yeah, well, so tell me in just a couple sentences what it was like to interact with the people behind the scenes, not so much, in space. Like, what was it
yeah,
like, on ground?
yeah. I mean, there's hundreds, you know, thousands. The astronauts are the tip of a very big pyramid.
Yeah.
And so the first people we already talked about, the trainers a little bit. You know, they're
Yep.
they're all very highly skilled engineers themselves that understand their systems, whether it's hydraulics or propulsion or whatever it is. And they tell you all about how their system's designed and how to operate it. And you know, for me as an engineer, that's an easy lesson to take. You know, the medical doctors, you know, maybe have to work a little harder for some of that, but these engineers are really good at training. So they're like immediately around the. And then you mentioned your friend down in Houston that didn't that
Stokes
was doing
McMillan.
so that's what they call sim soup, the simulation supervisor that injects all the failures. You know.
Right.
So when you get within about 6 months of your launch, you start doing what we call integrated sims, which you're in the cockpit for maybe 3 days in the
Oh,
shuttle
wow.
simulator in our case, and then the mission control team is at their desk and they rotate through their shifts, and then the sim suit people are in the back room injecting
Right.
scripts into the computers to simulate a mission with failures and so forth. Yeah, so that's kind of the next level is mission control. And there you got in the mission control room, you've got like 30 people, but for each person in there, there's the back room. He's got five or six more engineers in the back room. All right, that's just NASA. And then, like in our mission, we had the satellite Solar Max. That was Goddard Space Flight Center. So there were another 100 people at Goddard in their mission control center. helping us get the satellite back under control so I could grapple it. That kind of
Oh
thing was
wow.
going on. And then you got your contractors. I mentioned I was up in Toronto.
Right.
A lot was Spar because they had the high fidelity arm simulator up there. So I was one of their first candidates, to really give a shakeout on the arm operationally. And I was also up there for IMAX. The IMAX people were in Toronto, So
That's
yeah,
close to my heart.
yeah. Well, I can tell you some more stories when you have a minute. But yeah. So just in my own little experience for my mission, it was probably 1,000 people, that were behind my training and operations
Wow.
preparation. Oh, yeah,
And was your training focused on operating the Canadarm, or did you
Mhm.
also train on regular mission protocols as well?
Well, I was the prior to being selected for that crew, I was working rendezvous because we had never done a rendezvous with a space shuttle. So they designated me to work with the mission planners on scripting the first rendezvous.
Okay.
And so George Abbey, I guess when he asked me to do that, had in the back of mind that he was going to assign me to that flight, which he did.
Yeah.
So I was Bob Crippen's rendezvous officer, so to speak.
Wow.
So the three of us did the rendezvous. So it was, Cripp, of course, as the commander, and Dick
Yep.
Scobie was the pilot doing the maneuvers, and then I was doing all the calculations and the backup on the trajectory analysis.
Very
But
cool.
back in that era, we only had coverage with Houston only like 15% of the time.
Wow.
So we were on our own. I mean, they would pass up what they thought would be the right solution on board, and we put that in our computers and look at it. But when it came time to do the maneuver, chances are Houston wasn't going to be there. So we had to make sure, yeah, we did the maneuver right, and it all worked fine, of course. But the issue was the shuttle had very little propellant when it was on orbit, and we had to
Right.
reserve about 300 feet per second to return.
Yeah.
Uh, and so we had enough to do the rendezvous with some margin. But after I don't know how much you know about solar max mission, but the satellite went tumbling out of control
Yes.
when Pinky tried to dock to it. So we had to end up doing a second rendezvous 2 days later. So we were right down to the red line on our fuel.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because
S
the shuttle like a big bus, where the Apollo and Gemini, they were like sports cars. They had plenty of
yeah.
margin, for their maneuvers, but we
See,
didn't have much margin because the shuttle was so heavy. But yeah, I didn't want to diminish the role of Houston there. They were still primary,
of
but, but
course. Of
but since
course.
we couldn't, and we ended up doing the maneuvers they told us to do. It wasn't like we had to invent on ourselves,
Yeah.
but they weren't there to talk to, when the thing was actually happening most of the time.
And I know Crippen, he was the first, he was STS-1, right? So he was like the
Yeah.
first one to, so you got a chance to fly with the first. And that mission you mentioned about as support role, was that a different mission from STS-41C, or was that the same exact mission?
Yeah, and I was the Capcom for the first three launches.
Oh, so you were actually
Yeah,
down on the ground in Capcom.
yeah. The
Wow,
first
so
launch.
that's important. That's an important role.
Yeah, the first three. Yeah, on the third launch, it was one of the few times that we had to shut down an engine. I had to uplink to Gordon Fullerton to shut down the center engine, I think it was.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's stuck. The hydraulic system powering it failed, and so the engine was running, but they couldn't throttle it back, so I had to shut it down during launch.
Yeah, I think I
So
did hear
that was a
about.
little dicey. We didn't
Yeah,
like that so much.
I think I remember that a bit from just like
Yeah,
reading about it. So
yeah.
STS-41C was your one mission in space then?
Mhm.
And was there a reason why you didn't go back?
I had a second mission actually. George Abbey had called me in his office. I don't know if you know who George Abbey was. He just passed away last year, but
Oh, that's too
he
bad.
he was the one that hired all the astronauts and he put all the crews together. And
Oh,
eventually he
okay.
became the center director of Houston. But he called me in, and we were still in training for 41C, and he called me in his office one day and said, "We have another mission assignment for you." And it was a good mission. It was with the Germans, a space lab mission called D1, which ended up flying a couple of years later. And the problem I had was I was on a leave of absence from Bell Labs, and they were telling me, and it was 1984, and you're too young for all this, but in 1984, the government, in its wisdom, split up the Bell system. They split AT&T away from the baby Bells, Western
Okay.
Electric, and Bell Labs all got split. So they told me if you want to have a career here, you got to come back now. And I said, well, I'm about to fly a mission. Can I think about it for a few weeks? And then in the meantime, George called me and so George let me think about it for 2 or 3 weeks. And then I went back and I actually turned that mission down.
There
And
was no
no
way
one
to
knew.
do there was no way to do both. You couldn't just fly for the
No.
six
Well,
days and
there was so much going on at AT&T then with the breakup that they said, if you want a career as an engineer here, you need to come back now.
okay.
And it was good timing in the sense that I went back and I ended up being the director of engineering for the satellite component of Bell
Okay.
Labs, Telstar satellites, which
Which is
which
also
led
in
to my
my that's also in my outline as that was the first weather was that the weather satellite or the first communication satellite was
communications. Yeah,
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 there was because the
yeah,
Tyros
Telstar
TIROS was the first weather
weather.
or and then Telstar.
Yeah,
These are all in my notes as we have to cover this because again, no one really talks about the beginning stages of the technology part of
yeah.
space.
Well,
So
this was
you worked on that?
by the time I went back then, I was Telstar 3, this Telstar
Okay.
3 family, and I was the head of engineering. And in fact, when I was still at NASA, we launched
Wow.
Telstar 301 on the shuttle, not on my mission, but 301. And then when I went back to Bell Labs, became the head of engineering of the, which and then we did Telstar 4, and then they sold. AT&T decided to sell us to Loral, and then I became the president of Loral Skynet which Skynet used to be part of AT&T. Now we were Loral Skynet, and then we launched 8 more satellites that we designed as Loral, and
Wow.
then I retired and started teaching.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but anyway, I turned on that mission, and no one knew about that except George and me. Uh,
Oh,
and
okay.
we,
So
we had
okay.
a reunion back in 2017, kind of an annual affair in December where all the astronauts come back, and our class had a special dinner with George, and just to thank him for all the career opportunities he gave us and so forth. And I stood up and told the story I just told
Oh
you
wow,
about.
okay.
Yeah, and he was laughing. Yes, and it was just making the point how good he was about helping us with our careers. He gave me 3 weeks to go off and figure out what I wanted to do. And I ultimately decided to go back to Bell Labs.
Yeah, I mean you had to make the right choice for you. I mean, it's a shame not being able to go back, but then again,
Yeah,
you needed a career and going to space isn't really going to be a
yeah.
career, I guess, because they keep
Yeah, I
changing
don't
the
regret
astronaut.
it, but yeah, see the trouble, the astronaut career is very up and down.
Right, that's what I mean. So,
Yeah, and usually you fly 2 or 3 missions and you end up working somewhere for a contractor, or maybe you stay
yeah.
at NASA in a management job. And I
Right.
didn't want to do either of those. I
Okay.
like the aerospace industry, but I wanted to get back to
The
yeah,
private sector. Yeah.
private sector. Yeah.
And then you moved on to Lehigh, and how did that all transpire? I mean, that's a whole full circle situation.
Yeah. I was for 7 years. I ran Loral Skynet, and we grew it to
Wow.
over almost a factor of 10. I think we had 2 satellites from
Whoa.
AT, 2 Telstar 4s when we were acquired, and then we added 8 more satellites in the next 5 or 6 years that were built now by Loral Space Systems Loral in Palo Alto. And then I retired, from that. The company got in trouble. You know what Global Star is, the satellite
It
telephone system?
definitely rings a bell.
Yeah, there's Iridium, which is the Motorola system for
Yeah.
satellite telephone, and yeah, but both those systems went bankrupt, and so Loral got in trouble, and they were downsizing. So I figured it was a good time to
Get
retire, and
out of
I
there.
wanted to teach anyway. So Lehigh was looking for someone to start to do more with the aerospace minor at the time, which is now turned into a whole master's program.
Yeah, I'm excited to promote that.
We have 3 aerospace clubs.
Okay.
One does rocket launches,
Okay.
and
Let's
then they
get let's
design
get
their own
them.
rockets and launch them. Yeah, and another one's designed a CubeSat, which we've proposed to NASA. Yeah, they're kind of standard design satellites. So we designed one to detect ocean plastics, and that's been
Okay.
sent to NASA to fly on the space station, off to be deployed from the space station sometime in the future. We
Nice.
and they also did a Mars rover as part of a national competition. And then my third group does airplane, like quad rotors and RC airplane, the airplane
Okay.
design.